Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 303. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about volcanoes and sugar plantations and Caribbean beaches as we go to St. Kitts.
I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we get into this week's interview, I do have three news stories for you. In the first one, a man seems to have figured out how to get through security more easily. At least that was my theory. But the airport spokesman at Washington Dulles said that an adult male was walking around the main terminal Monday morning and was not wearing any clothing or underwear. Airport policemen took him into custody without incident and determined that he needed medical attention. You think? And that's ridiculous. If we wanted to see something like that, we would fly Ryanair, because Ryanair is proposing a new in-flight app that would allow passengers to screen porn at 30,000 feet. And that may give you some interesting conversations with your son or daughter. Meanwhile, pilots and flight attendants for Russian airline Yukitia have been accused of getting high without their airplane. They were accused of smoking pot before a flight, and the flight, which had 192 passengers, was delayed for 12 hours because the passengers' high blood pressure and rapid heart rate forced them to bring in a new crew to fly the plane. The article I read made no mention of the airline's official response, whether there was any discipline involved, but I'm going to guess they were not amused. For links to all three of those stories, check out the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. I'd like to welcome back to the show Matt Long, who is coming to us from landlopers.com, who is the editor, chief cook, and bottle washer at that site. And Matt has been on the show before talking about Palestine and the Palestinian Authority. But Matt, this time you went someplace a little more tropical.
I did. I went to St. Kitts in the Leeward Islands.
And my understanding is you were a guest there?
I was flown down by the St. Kitts Marriott Resort, and I was invited to spend a few days there.
Excellent. St. Kitts, first of all, we're in the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in the Leeward Islands, as I recall.
Yes, we are.
What does that mean?
That means we're in the bottom part of the Caribbean, and it's actually one of the smallest Caribbean islands. It's only 69 square miles. There's only 30,000 people living there, but it's also one of the most important Caribbean islands and has been for centuries. It was at the center of both the French and British Empire, their conquest of the region.
And I believe the British ended up with it, but the French started with it, if I've got my history right.
A little bit of both. They actually shared it. They shared it, if you can believe it. It was first sighted by Columbus in 1493, but he never actually set foot there. And it was for a long time shared equally by the French and the British, one of the few examples of that. They did team together, unfortunately, to massacre the native Indian population. And after that, they shared the island equally until a period of time when the French decided to lay siege to the British fort on the island. And the French won, but a few years later, the British got the colony back. And from that point onward, it was British Commonwealth.
This would have been the Carib Indians, I assume, from whom we get
That's
the name
correct.
Caribbean. Yeah, they did not fare well very many places.
They did not. They did not. It's actually, you can see the site today. It's known as Bloody Point. It's one of the tourist attractions on the island.
And what else are the highlights? I'm not necessarily implying that is a highlight, but what are the highlights of St. Kitts?
Well, there's a lot. It's a great tropical island. It's a Caribbean island. So you have, even though it's only 18 miles long, 5 miles wide, there are 13 different beaches where you can enjoy yourself. But if you're like me, I'm a history buff, there's a lot to do and see. Believe it or not, St. Kitts has a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's called Brimstone. It's on this massive hill, and that's where the original fort was constructed. It was not believed by the French that anyone could ever bring cannons up this massive hill, and yet the British were able to, and that's how eventually they laid claim to the island. And after that, they held the island because of that. It was called the Gibraltar of the Caribbean for a very long time because it was so imposing and seemingly impossible to breach. But the British left the island in the 19th century, and it fell into disrepair. But actually, early in the 20th century, it began a period of restoration, and it was actually Prince Charles who was one of the key people in the 1980s to bring back the site. And in 1999, UNESCO recognized it as a World Heritage Site.
Interesting. Now, St. Kitts as a whole, do I have an incorrect picture? I picture St. Kitts as known as a jet-setter high-end resort.
No.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, Chris, that's not right. It's
I can't edit this out, but
no, it's actually one of the last Caribbean islands to become a tourist destination. Up until 2005, they were still, believe it or not, their economy was entirely dependent on sugar plantation. They had 365 years of economic dependency on sugar, and it was only in 2005 when they ended that. And at that point in time, yes, they then decided to go to tourism as their main revenue. But since then, there's only been a few resorts built. There's only one or two on the coast, and there are a couple inland, but that's about it. It's actually a great example of heading to, it's hard to say it, but the real Caribbean, that you don't have a McDonald's or a Starbucks. You don't have the kind of American influence that you see in a lot of places. Yeah, they get cruise ships. That's only 1 or 2 times a week. But for the rest of the time, it's just a very basic island with 30,000 people who go about their daily lives.
Interesting. And what stood out for you?
St. Kitts is home to one of the largest volcanoes in the Caribbean, and it's called Mount, I'm going to butcher this name, Mount Loamuiga, and it's huge. It's 3,792 feet, and I climbed it. It used to be called Mount Misery. It took us round trip 5 hours to do. It's about 2.5 hours up, 2.5 hours down. It's not for the faint at heart, I will say, to be diplomatic. I've climbed a lot of places in the world. I've gone to Masada in Israel. I've done huge hikes in Hawaii, in New Zealand, Australia. This is the hardest hike I think I've ever done in my life. But it was well worth it. To sit up on the top of a caldera, which is completely taken over by rainforest, and enjoy a lunch. It's an experience you can't have anywhere else. In the center is a very small lake that only just reformed a few years ago. In the background, we heard the noises of monkeys and mongoose, if you can believe it. There are mongoose on St. Kitts.
Now, they can't be naturally on St. Kitts, can they?
No, they were introduced.
Okay, to get rid of the snakes, I would assume.
Exactly. But the monkeys are native. But it was just a remarkable experience. And the entire time, we didn't encounter, other than my group, which is just 5 of us, any other people. The entire time, 5 hours. And you can't say that for a lot of Caribbean islands. You just can't, because on a lot of Caribbean islands, you have very similar experiences, and you have thousands of people touring and doing the same thing all the time. But not in St. Kitts. St. Kitts, you really get to feel the real Caribbean. It was great.
Now, you were staying at a resort, as we mentioned.
Yes.
Are there, which I assume was lovely.
Yes.
Are there other opportunities if you didn't want to do the high-end stay? Do you know what accommodations are available in a more budget price range?
Well, actually, where I stayed was actually the budget price range for St. Kitts.
Okay.
The per night rate is not that high. The rest of the places on the island tend to be a little bit more expensive. They're more plantation style, so you're not actually on the beach. You're up in the mountains.
And you say a bit more expensive, so high-end places are...
Between, I would say, $200 to $300 a night.
Okay.
Versus the Marriott, which is probably about $130 to $150 a night.
Okay.
The St. Kitts Marriott, as I said, is one of the few places that's actually on the beach. The other places are plantation style, so they're taking over the old plantation homes, the sugar plantations on the island. And they're very Old English, very B&B-ish. I've been to them. They're very lovely. And if that's your thing, that's great. But they are definitely more expensive. They're removed, a little bit more quiet. Depends on your taste. One's different. Some people really enjoy that. Other people look for something that's more on the ocean. But all in all, there's not that many resorts on St. Kitts itself. Mm-hmm. It's still, like I said, tourism is 8 years old. That's it.
What was the biggest surprise?
I think the fact that tourism is 8 years old, and the fact that you're in the Caribbean, it's a pretty short flight from the States. It's easy to get to, and that you can still feel completely removed. It was great. I've been to the Bahamas, I've been to Jamaica, Grand Cayman, a lot of different places in the Caribbean, and I never got that feel. But you could definitely see yourself completely secluded there. That's what you want. That's why you go to the Caribbean, ideally, is for that sensation.
Now, I'm curious, were you there when a cruise ship was in port?
I was not.
Okay.
No, I was not. I did ask about that, though, and I'm told at the most it's 2 at one time. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at 2 ships times 3,000 people. It's a lot of people on a small island.
Right, it's about a fifth of the population.
Yeah, exactly. But they tend to do very similar things.
On the other hand, when I was in Santorini in the Mediterranean, they said in the summertime 7 cruise ships come.
Yep.
And there can't be 30,000 people on the island, I wouldn't guess. So even more so.
And those poor mules, I can only imagine. Having been there myself on a cruise ship. And a lot of people in St. Kitts, they tend to stay in the capital when they're on a cruise ship. The port terminal is right there in the center of town. And so there's a lot of different sights to see around there. There are specific sites around the island that only open when cruise ships come into town. For instance, there's a railroad.
The old sugar,
sugar plantation railroad that only opens up when cruise ships are in town. I'm told it's lovely for the first hour or so, but it's several hours long. Right. So, note of caution to people. It's about a 3-hour trip, and I'm told the first hour is lovely, but after that, you're looking for ways to escape. But other than that, on St. Kitts, you have wonderful diving, wonderful snorkeling opportunities. There's very deep waters, very close inland. Mm-hmm. I don't dive, I only snorkel. So for people like me, it's great because I can see a wide variety of fish without having to go very far out.
Okay. What local that you met made an impact on you?
There's an area of the island called the Strip. And it's not a Las Vegas strip. It's a strip of what they call shacks on the beach. It's on Frigate Bay. That's on the Atlantic side of the island. And there's probably 9 or 10 of them. And, I mean, they're literally shacks. There are restaurant facilities, a bar, and music. But they are the spot to be for locals and tourists alike. A couple of them are open 24 hours a day. One of them even has free Wi-Fi. So that's either good or bad, depending on your point of view.
I don't know. I'm a blogger. I don't know why that would be bad, but
But they're amazing, to get a little bit of local culture. We went down there one evening, and people are just having a high time, just having a lot of fun, just dancing and enjoying themselves. And you can go down there for an authentic conch fritter and a beverage and watch the ocean and just enjoy yourself. It's not one person per se, but it was just the atmosphere that the people who actually live there enjoy. That's what really impressed me most.
Interesting. Now, you were down there just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Which should be the sort of the tail end of the hurricane season.
Yep, sure is.
So that wouldn't be the high season for St. Kitts, I'm assuming.
No, not usually. The Caribbean, its lowest season is hurricane season because it's the biggest question mark.
Because it might be lovely or you might be fleeing for your life. It's somewhere in between there.
That's absolutely true. But, that's the only time I've ever been to the Caribbean because those are the best deals. Be it on a cruise or independent trip. Only been to the Caribbean in the fall.
And, of course, the cruise, they will move the ship if there's a problem with weather. They won't go to the ports that they promised you because they may have to avoid something.
That's right.
When you commit to going to the island, you're kind of going to the island.
That's right. St. Kitts has been lucky. They've only had one major hurricane in recent memory. Mm-hmm. That was a few years ago, granted. I think it was just about 10 years ago. And they had about $500 million worth of damage. But it's been completely rebuilt. They're fine. The further south you go in the Caribbean, the less risk you have of hurricane damage. Mm-hmm. The closer you are north, going up towards the mainland United States, the greater probability of damage there is. But definitely going in the fall is a risk. But you do get much better rates. Their high season is absolutely in the winter and then heading into the spring. And then the lower season would be going to late spring into the summer.
Because I'm not picturing that the weather other than hurricane season is going to be all that different.
No. I mean, it was beautiful when we were there. I mean, it was stunning. It was warm. I was at the beach almost every day. It was great. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
One picture that summarizes St. Kitts for you?
I think the one picture would be when I was standing on top of Brimstone, the UNESCO site I talked about, looking across the 13 canyons. It was just a stunning view, though. You could see the entire island. You could see everything approaching. It really gave you a great understanding of what living there is like. You have to imagine that the plantation era just ended a few years ago. And so you still have land plots plotted out for the plantations. And so you have this gracious amount of land. There's this gorgeous. And most people don't live inland. They live near the coast because the inland is such a high elevation. You can't live there. It's just one of those pristine, beautiful areas that you dream about, really.
Now, a lot of people, as we're saying, are going to visit St. Kitts from a cruise ship.
Yep.
And they may only get 3-4 blocks from the cruise ship terminal.
Yep.
They're not going to probably do the hike that you did. Are there other things that you think you would miss in St. Kitts if you just did the arrive at 9 a.m. and leave by 5 sort of itinerary?
Well, I think you can do a lot on that itinerary.
It's not real big, so...
No. It's, like I said, one of the smallest Caribbean islands. You can do a lot. If you pick the right tour, you can do that hike, even though I don't know if that's the most recommended. And you can go up to Brimstone. But even if you just stay in town, there's a lot to do and see there. It's a colonial place. You have Federation Square. You have remnants of the slave trade was very prominent in St. Kitts up until 1807 when it was outlawed by the British. So that's several hundred years of the slave trade taking place right there in St. Kitts. And they commemorate it. They recognize it. They don't hide from it, even though 90% of the population originate from that trade.
Any place you go to that had sugar as its economy in that area is going to be very involved in the slave trade because we'd already killed off the Caribbeans. And disease, for one thing, was going to probably kill about 90% of them anyway. That was the typical thing. So even if you didn't have a massacre, they weren't going to survive the meeting. And so you replaced the population.
That's right. It's something that's very recognized today. We did a brief tour of the central downtown area, and they made sure that they pointed that out to me.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the stocks were. This is where people were brought in. This is very important to us to know. This is a lot about the people. And it's represented not only there, but also right after Christmas for 2 weeks. Not unlike other Caribbean islands, they have a carnival, a festival. In Bahamas, they have Junkaroo. Other islands have different things. It usually takes place right after Christmas. And they have one that lasts 2 weeks. They call it Carnival, even though it has no relation to the Carnival of Brazil or other places.
Okay.
But it celebrates the same culture. And they have a lot of elements of African storytelling and other methods of dance and song. It's hard to find it anywhere else that's still surviving. It's great. It really is. And they really do, I don't want to say revel in it, but take a lot of pride in it. And that's just wonderful.
Your best money-saving tip for St. Kitts, besides having somebody send you free to go look at a resort, which has got to be a pretty good one, yeah.
No, that's pretty good. I would say going for a meal down the shacks on Trib Bay.
Mm-hmm.
They have some great food. You know, get the best local fish, and you're really going to enjoy the meal because you're going to be in a lively atmosphere.
And is there a typical drink that is the St. Kitts special? Something with rum, I would assume?
Anything with rum is the Kittian drink of choice. But no, there's not anything one particular. Although I did encounter a fruit I had never seen before, and it's called soursop.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, I had never heard of it either. And I was at Brimstone National Park, and at the end there's a little cafe, and there's a man that every morning makes fresh-made juices. And he had an array, you know, you could have mango, whatever, and then he had something called soursop. And so I tried it, looked it up. It's apparently a tropical fruit I'd never heard of before. It's slightly sour, but it was delicious. It was great. And that's probably one of my best takeaways from St. Kitts is find yourself soursop juice. It's excellent.
One thing that makes you laugh, and say only in St. Kitts.
Well, in St. Kitts, not unlike other Caribbean islands, the beaches are public.
Sure.
Which means that no hotel owns the beach. There's no such thing as a private beach. So even though you're in a hotel that abuts the beach, it's free. You know, everyone can go there. It doesn't matter. But as soon as I walked down onto the beach from, they're going to kill me, from Marriott, there's this lady who popped up and said, "Would you like a massage? Would you like a massage?" And then next to me, there's another guy who's like, "Hey, do you want to go on a horseback ride?" You know, and suddenly I had all these people all over me. It's like, no, I'm good. But thank you very much. So I'm sure they're very nice massages, but it wasn't for me. It made me laugh because everyone I know that's been there has had the same experience.
Before we get into our typical last questions, anything else we should know before we go to St. Kitts?
I would just say if you're there on a cruise, make an effort to get out of the capital. Don't go on the railroad ride. Go do something unique. There's a lot of unique things. You don't have to go hike up a volcano. There's so many other things to go do. Be it zip lining, be it snorkeling, diving. There are other towns on St. Kitts you can get to. And it's 18 miles long. You know, it doesn't take very long. It's very easy to get to. Go see them. If you're staying in a resort, do the same thing. Don't just stay at the resort. Get out and get to know the people a little bit. I mean, they're fascinating. They really are.
And you say there are other towns, so I'm going to challenge you on that. What other town, if you have time for one, should you go to?
The one on the other side of the island. I don't know the name.
So it's on the far side of the island from the capital.
Yes, there is.
Okay.
And one interesting thing, St. Kitts has one of the largest veterinary academies, schools in the Caribbean. And it's like 99% of American students there. And it's fascinating because they don't have any stray animals practically in St. Kitts because all the students at the schools adopt them and take care of them. So many other places I've been to in the Caribbean, elsewhere in the world, you say stray dogs, which breaks my heart, and you know, all this other stuff, but not in St. Kitts because they actually take them in, adopt them, and then give them out to willing homes. So it's been there for years. It's a huge animal welfare ethic going on in St. Kitts.
You know the last two questions? You know they're coming? Finish this thought. You really know you're in St. Kitts when what?
When you see a green vervet monkey run across the road.
A green monkey?
Green vervet monkey, yes.
Is it physically green?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay. Why do they call it that, I wonder?
That's a good question.
And then if you had to summarize St. Kitts in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Green, honest, and energetic.
Honest. That
Yeah.
was something you didn't talk about.
I say honest in the world of being real.
Okay.
There's no pretension.
Okay.
There's not a tourist side and an island side. There's just an island side. It's nice to see.
Well, Matt, thanks so much for coming back on the show and telling us a little bit about St. Kitts.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
In news of the community, I continue to get comments on the show about Quebec. And one comment we got was from Joseph, and Joseph had some interesting tidbits to tell us. One is you can save money by staying during the summer at the University of Laval. Dorm rooms have 2 single beds. There's a direct bus to Frontenac, and it is much less expensive, though not as impressive. He also recommended the waterfall, Montmorency, and taking the bridge to the island of Orléans. You can rent a car and tour the island. There are many cideries that offer tastes of cider, both natural and iced. The cider is unique to Quebec and is fantastic. There are many local farms that produce iced cider where apples are left on the tree until several days of minus 20-degree weather and then crushed for the juice, then fermented from there. Makes a wonderful dessert wine. And he also recommended 30 miles away is the Quebec city of Saint-Anne-de-Pré, a Catholic pilgrimage site. A large cathedral was made in France and shipped over to Quebec and assembled in the early 1900s. Very impressive, but I think the lower church is much more beautiful and has a Quebec style. It is all blue and white with large snowflakes on the ceiling. Reminds me of what the Winter Palace of the Snow Princess in C.S. Lewis's Narnia would look like. There's a free tour every day, both in French and English. And then also 120 miles northeast of Quebec is Tadoussac, a beautiful little town on the river where you can take whale-watching boat tours. A very romantic town with lots of bed and breakfasts, and the Hotel Tadoussac, if you are on a Frontenac budget. The whales come right up to the town and into the bay, so you can see them without even taking the boat. The drive is fantastic too. It will remind you of the Pacific Coast Highway, the road going between the mountains and the river, curving and following the landscape. You have to take the free ferry over to Tadoussac, but it leaves every 15 minutes. And Joseph's email is available on a comment on the episode about visiting Montreal and Quebec in case you want to read it for yourself. With that, we're going to end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, feel free to drop an email to host@amateurtraveler, or even better yet, leave a comment on the episode at amateurtraveler.com so that other people can enjoy it as well. You can also connect with your fellow amateur travelers at the Facebook site, facebook.com/amateurtraveler. And this week, I would love to hear from people who took a trip because they were inspired by the Amateur Traveler. And I'd like to see if I can get your help to write a blog post about your trip. I'll send you some questions if you send me an email. You can also follow me on Twitter @Chris2X. And as always, thanks so much for listening.